Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bridges Brothers Barbecue. We have a skirt steak and two flank steaks here, and they're cheaper cuts of beef because beef prices right now have kind of gone out of control. So I figure let's try to make some good barbecue out of cheaper cuts of meat. In order to do that, I'm using this tenderizer. It's a physical tenderizer. It shoots these razor blades into the meat and cuts the connective tissue apart. It's a really nice tool to use if you're trying to tenderize meat and make a better product. I also marinated these for about 5 hours in a real simple marinade. Also, I'm going to be putting this seasoning. It's called their black seasoning. They're out of Montgomery, Alabama. It's Pepper Tree Steaks and Wine, and they make their own seasoning in house. It's delicious. So as you see, you can see kind of the little holes in the meat that I use. They're from me using the tenderizer. Um, Now we're going to be talking about the grains of these meat. There's two different cuts here. So in this cut, the grains go up and down. So I'm going to be cutting it across the grain here to give a better tender piece. And these, the grains run left and right, so I'll be cutting up and down against the grain. And same with this one. This one, same thing. The grains run left and right, so I'm going to be cutting up and down to give a more tender product at the end. And again, one more look at that seasoning. I'll be using the Pepper Tree Black. And in order to get it to stick, I'm using a real light coat of oil. You can use pretty much any oil. I advise against olive oil because it's got such a low smoke temperature. But I use a light coat, and the rub sticks to the meat no problem. So, why exactly am I doing this? When I could just cook a brisket, or I could cook steaks, or want pork, I could cook ribs, or I could cook some pulled pork. Well, this is going to be an experiment to see if you can get really good results with cheaper cuts of meat. These are cheaper cuts of meat. These are very tough, and normally people cook them really fast, really high, to keep them as close to rare, medium rare as possible, so they don't get too tough. Well, in the spirit of barbecue, which remember, barbecue is about taking cheap cuts of meat, adding some special smoke to it, some low and slow, to break down that connective tissue, to break down that fat, to give you some really good results at the end. That was the whole reason barbecue even started. Well, in that spirit, I'm going to start this series off by doing the flank steak to see if we can do low and slow to get a good result at the end. If so, it might be a really good alternative to doing something like steak or doing something like brisket. I want to experiment with some other meats in the next couple of weeks to see if we can get some really good results again from low and slow and really cheap cuts that most people don't barbecue today. This includes chuck roast. I want to try one of those. I want to try some other really cheap cuts of pork, and we're going to see if we can get some good results. Again, this is a big experiment. It's going to be, I don't know, 6-7 episodes, just to see if you can cook really, well, not really cheap. Right now, everything's pretty expensive, but to cook the cheaper cuts, so you're not spending hundreds of dollars on meat. And you could, I don't know, spend $40 to feed a family. I got about, I think it was like 6 pounds of flank steak for $40. That's pretty good, because I could spend almost $100 at Costco on a brisket for, I don't know, a 14-pound brisket, and end up trimming off, I don't know, 3 pounds, maybe 4 pounds of fat. So by the time everything's said and done, I've got a 10-pound brisket that cost me about $90 to $100. Well, this is going to be 6 pounds of meat that's going to cost me a fraction of that. So let's see if we can get good results from low and slowing this meat. And I'll take you along the journey. Right now I'm heating up the smoker, getting it ready to go. The meat is sitting on my counter, getting room temperature. They're sitting in the seasonings I put on it earlier, and they're just waiting to go. So as soon as this gets up to temp, as soon as the smoke stops billowing out, that dirtier smoke, as soon as it gets to a cleaner smoke, I'm going to go ahead and put the meat on and take you on this journey. Also, before I forget, Yogi, hey buddy. You guys will probably end up seeing him in almost every video I do, because he's normally out here with me, and you know, what's better than spending an afternoon smoking meat and hanging out with your dog. Okay, so this is the same pot that I use for pulled pork. I usually fill it up with apple cider vinegar or water to keep the humidity up during long cooks. But for shorter cooks like the one I'm doing today, this is my secret weapon. I picked up this tip from Mad Science Barbecue with Jeremy Yoder. I can put his channel in the description. But I picked this tip up from him, and I love it. So you add Wagyu beef tallow, and I also put this in the description where you can buy this on Amazon. I put it in my pot, and I smoke it on the smoker. I also wrap in butcher's paper once the meat's halfway done. I wrap it, soak the butcher's paper in Wagyu beef tallow that's been smoked, and it rehydrates the well, rehydrates the wrong word. It makes the meat juicy and moist, because when you get a juicy piece of meat, it's not water content that makes it juicy. It's the fat. The fat that's rendered makes the beef tender. But since there's not a lot of fat in the flank steaks that I'm cooking, I have to add fat to it to make it juicy. So I'll be adding this, about 4 big tablespoons of this into the pot to smoke. So when I say heaping, I mean something at least like that. So I add 4 of these to the pot to smoke. Okay, so this is the setup right now. I have this smoker set at 180. Set at 180. This is how the meat's arranged. The hot spot on my smoker is over here underneath the pan. I've got my pan of beef tallow that's going to be smoking for the whole cook. I'm going to do the first hour at 180. Let me go ahead and close this. First hour at 180. Second hour is going to be at 225. The reason being is pellet smokers aren't the greatest for imparting smoke flavor. So me smoking the tallow adds another depth of flavor. Me smoking this at a lower temperature for an hour, an extra hour, is adding more smoke flavor. So that's why I do 180 for 1 hour, crank up the temp, do 225 for another hour, then I start checking for tenderness and for temperature. I really want the meat to be over 205 or 204, 205, because that's when the connective tissue starts breaking down in brisket. So that's my reasoning. So I'm going up to about 202, 203 before I start checking it. I'll pull it off, and then I'll show you what I do after that. But again, I'm smoking the tallow to add an extra layer of flavor, and I'm smoking this for an extra hour at a lower temp to try to add that extra smoke flavor. I wanted to touch on why exactly I am smoking the beef tallow and what purpose it serves. I learned from another YouTuber named Jeremy Yoder. He runs a YouTube channel, Mad Science Barbecue, that when you smoke meat, the juiciness does not come from water content in the meat. It comes from the rendered fat. And since there's not a lot of rendered fat or fat to render in this cut of meat, since it's so lean, I have to add fat to it in the form of tallow. So if I add tallow to it, wrap it in butcher's paper and put it back on the smoker, hopefully that will result in a really juicy piece of meat at the end of this smoke. So again, water does not equal juiciness in meat. It's the rendered fat. So that's the whole purpose of cooking low and slow, is to try to render that fat, break down that connective tissue to give you a good tender piece of meat at the end of this. Okay, so this is what I've done. Got kind of busy earlier. My niece came over, so I kind of helped babysit her a little bit, so I didn't get to film much. But smoker, meat was on for 1 hour at 180. Checked it, looked fine. Cranked the temp up to 225. Let it go another hour. Now cranked it up to 275 for the final like 20-30 minutes, and I wrapped it in butcher's paper, and they're soaked in that beef tallow. I will show you what it looks like for the big reveal when these are done. I'm probably going to let them rest about 10 minutes like I would a steak, but I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Alright, so the meat, just pulled it off. It's at about 205 degrees. And while I brought it in, I decided to talk about this, the Binging with Babish knife. I've had this thing for a couple of months now, and I'm going to do a full review on it to let you know how it is after like 4 months of use. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and cut open this package and take a look at the meat. That's what it looks like so far. I'm going to let it rest for about 10 minutes, and then we'll take a closer look at it. Just ended up opening it. Look at all that juice. It's literally falling apart. It broke in the middle when I tried to take it out. But it's breaking apart. Super, super tender. So remember, my grains ran this way. So I'm going to cut this way.
In the back of his truck and drove back to Tallahassee, where he found an isolated area to bury his friend. Later that day, when Brian got a call from his father saying Mike was missing, the two drove to Lake Seminole.
During the storm that came through that night, my dad wanted to look at it.
Like his riveting testimony, his first-person story of taking best friend out and killing him.
Super, super juicy.
It was strong, emotional testimony.
Really juicy.
Strong enough to convict.
Super tender.
Now defense attorney Ethan Way rose with his goal set upon demolishing.
Look at that, but it's not totally falling apart, which is good, but it is tender. And here's the final product on a steak sandwich that I made. It turned out really good. It had good smoke flavor. Perfect steak sandwich. Couldn't have asked for anything better. Again, thank you guys for coming to view this video. If you think that I earned your subscription, I would love to have it. If you think that I earned a thumbs up, I would love to get a thumbs up. And leave a comment down in the comments to tell me what you would have done with this same piece of meat. Again, thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope to see you in the next one.